See. This is my first time using YouTube, so I just want to see if this is working. If anyone out there can hear me, can you just throw something in the chat? So we'll start right at about 10 o'clock. See if anyone else comes in. Oh, it's good to see you, Travis, Dr. Purcell. So are any of you using Zoom out in Missouri for your stuff with your schools or with your students? What do you think, Dr. Purcell? Should we get started? I've heard Google Meet's good. Are you using it for any sort of in time um, rehearsal type stuff, either as single one-on-one lessons, or is there the lag there just as bad as it is with Zoom? Okay, I guess we'll get started. Well, welcome. Thanks to Dr. Purcell for asking me to come and do a little bit on this. Um, my name's Phil Edelman. For those of you that I don't know, I teach at the University of Maine, but I do have Missouri connections. I did my PhD at UMKC, graduated 1,000 years ago, and now I'm up in Maine where I love teaching. I teach music ed courses. I conduct one of the bands, supervise student teachers. Um, I do a lot of stuff up there and I love it. I taught in Kansas for a long time, down in Goddard, which is a suburb of Wichita. And so my teaching life was in the Midwest and now I teach in the Northeast. Dr. Purcell asked me to come in and talk a little bit today about instrumental music, sort of in the times that we live in. And I want to start with just a blanket statement that is, everything is different now. From my homemade haircut this morning to, having my husband at home with me all day right now, and the fun and challenges that presents. Everything's different, and we have to acknowledge that and give ourselves a break. And so, I'd like to start with just a couple of sort of basic principles that I think should guide our lives right now as teachers. There's four guiding principles that I'm having all of my students sort of think about as they teach. And the first one is that, we're all overwhelmed right now as teachers, as students, as parents, as all of the different roles that you play. And so we have to acknowledge that and make adjustments to our lives. Um, Remember that some of you just became a full-time teacher and a stay-at-home parent, and a stay-at-home parent full-time teacher, and we're in survival mode right now. We've got to get through this, and we will get through this. Um, Consider carefully what you can handle and still be effective in the roles you're covering. If it is not practical for you to think that you're going to have your 40 minutes with each class every single day that you had before, and it's probably not practical that you even think you're going to see your kids all at the same time. So we need to give ourselves a break and do what we can. The second principle that I'm telling my students and my colleagues in the field is your students are right now feeling pretty overwhelmed, confused, uncomfortable. If they're younger students, they probably don't know too much about what's going on, or at least the information they're getting is incomplete. And that can make them more uncomfortable too. If you teach older students, high school type students, the chances are high that they just became full-time babysitters to their siblings, tech support staff for their parents. They've picked up shifts at grocery stores or other essential businesses to cover lost income for their families. And school might not be the first thing on their mind. It's a really important thing that we don't think about a lot, right? These students are going through a lot right now. And I think we need to make some accommodations for them. I think we need to be kind for them. We need to be kind to them. We need to ask them what they need. I think we need to check in often, and we need to ask them for their feedback about what we're doing. That's not always the most comfortable thing for us as teachers, is to ask our students kind of what they think about what we're doing or what we can do better for them. But I think during this time, we really should be doing that a lot. The other thing we need to keep in mind is some of our students are taking 6 or 7 online classes at the same time. Something we would never allow our students or advise them to do in the real world. A lot of our students are now sharing devices with their parents and siblings, and some have spotty or no Wi-Fi at all. And so as we go through and we try to teach them through the rest of the year, we need to think about all those limitations that are in place and about the stress and anxiety that we may be adding to their lives by saying, no, this thing is due at this time. There's no extensions. It must be submitted via a video, and you must send it to this website. Some of our students may not be able to do that stuff. We need to be a little bit more flexible than we probably already are. The third principle is this is new for us. That's okay. Some of us are more adept at tech than others. I've had to learn a lot, and I've had some of my students teach me a lot over the last couple of weeks. So we should be reaching out to all those folks. Your students can become great teachers for you if you trust them enough to do that. If you use Zoom, your colleagues and your students, if you allow them, they can actually access your computer through Zoom and show you how to do certain things if you need help with them. If you trust that student, it might be worth giving them access to your computer for 5 minutes rather than spending 2 hours trying to figure this thing out on your own. So, it depends what your level of trust is with your students, what your district policies are, and, be smart about it. But there's a lot of good people out there who are willing and happy to help you. And if at the end of this you think I'm one of those people, just get in touch with me. I'm happy to help you with anything I can. And then the last thing, and this is sort of instrumental music specific, is that we who have almost always thought of instrumental large ensemble courses as collaborative performance experiences, we need to shift that perspective now, right? There is no software out there that I've found that will allow our students to perform in real time while focusing on the things that we often harp on in rehearsal, things like balance and blend. If you're playing into a microphone, that's now someone else's job. We can't really harp on that in our digital rehearsals as they stand right now. The technology isn't there quite yet. But we can still focus on the building blocks of excellent instrumental music teaching. We have said for years that we are a curricular subject. We teach real concepts. There are real skills involved that we practice in class. And now's the time that we can actually do some of that stuff without having to worry about that concert that's coming up in a week. So I think we can see this as an opportunity. I really do. I have some thoughts about becoming better distance learning educators. So we'll kind of go through this, and then if any of you have questions, I'll get to them, you can fill up that chat box on the right side of your screen. The first sort of hint I have for anyone who's in the field right now, this isn't distance education specific, but you have to be as specific as possible with your expectations for your students now. So whereas in rehearsal, we could describe things and take multiple attempts at things, in this digital world, we really can't do that unless you're going to send, 15 emails back and forth a day to all of your students. So be as specific as you can and try to make whatever it is that your students are doing, if they're submitting a video or if they're submitting a written reflection or whatever it is that you've assigned to them, be very specific about your expectations. Steer clear of fuzzy language like, please send me a recording of measure 55 to 69 and play it as beautifully as you can. That's going to mean something different to everyone who's playing. If you're doing it so that you can sort of assess what they feel beautiful means, I guess that's okay. But you're going to be more successful if you give them specific instructions like, please record measure 55 to 69, paying attention to the articulation. The only thing I'm thinking about right now is the articulation, and I want to make sure I can hear where you're slurring and where you're tonguing. That's a really specific piece of information to give to your students, and you can have them submit things multiple ways, concentrating on the different aspects. And then maybe at the end of that chain of instruction, you can have them sort of send their best shot, incorporating all the other things that you've already covered. The younger the student is, the more specific your instruction has to be. Along with that, you have to give specific feedback, okay? Answering a student with a check mark or a quick note that says that was good, it's not going to help them retain any information or any new skill that you've taught them. And it's not going to reinforce what it is that they've done well. So we need to think about the feedback that we give our students. If you've asked about articulation and you give them feedback on their posture, you're probably not doing them any favors, okay? In this digital world right now, I encourage you to keep your submissions short, encapsulating only one concept at a time, like we talked before. The prep work can take a lot longer than a minute or two. That's fine. But the video or the audio recording itself shouldn't be very long. And the reason for that is because of the technology that's available to a lot of our students, right? We have to think now about file sizes, upload speeds, the space that they have available on their phones or their tablets or their computers. If you're asking them to record a 20-minute recital, a lot of them just don't have the technologies or the space on their technologies to do that. So think about, just send me this little chunk or this response or this online form or whatever, so that it's accessible to the majority, if not all of your students. We are stuck right now in thinking, or at least a lot of my colleagues that I've spoken to over the last few weeks are stuck thinking that everything has to be a playing test or some sort of playing assessment. I would encourage you to think more broadly about what we do in music than that, right? So if you think about the national standard categories, we've got creating, performing, responding, and connecting. So if we think about just the first one, creating, you can have students, come up with a concert that they'd like to play someday. You can teach them how to use publisher websites like Hal Leonard or J.W. Pepper or anything like that to find music and put together, say, a 20-minute rehearsal or a 20-minute concert set. You can explain what grade levels in music are and where your ensemble currently plays and show them how to use filters on those websites. A lot of students love doing that stuff, and they love discovering the new music that's out there. So give them the opportunity to do that. For more experienced students, you can use apps like Flipgrid or iMovie, Acapella, or any of the others out there to create duets, trios, or small ensembles just on their own, where they're playing, the two lines out of the book and putting it together. Or you could have them do it with friends where they send videos back and forth and line them up. Looks like Catherine just made a comment that she asked her students to use Smart Music to explore and find music. That's a great resource. Smart Music is free right now. I don't know how long that's going to be going on. I heard that it would be through June. but I don't have I don't have an email or anything from the company on that. But that's a great way to do it. They've opened up their library, so let your students look. It's great. The second modality, or the second big category in our national standards, is performing, right? Most of us have had performance as our goal from day one, no matter what we learned in our college methods courses, right? We have to get ready for the concert. That's what we do as band and orchestra directors, right? But now's a good time to make technique, understanding, musical literacy, all the other stuff that we justify our existence with, in curricular terms at least, to be our goals. So how can we do that? We can have a one-on-one lesson with our students using Zoom or Hangouts or FaceTime if that's appropriate, or any of the other platforms that are out there. There's a teacher up here who's done, I think, an incredible job. She's a middle school teacher, and what she's doing is she's having living room recitals. So all of her students are working out of whatever method book they are, and their living room recital is line whatever out of the book. And so what the students are doing is they're each assigned one day. And so if it's a class of 30 kids, then once every 6 days or whatever it is, 5 of the students submit a recording. The teacher puts it up on their student website that only the students can see. And they have a little class recital where they can applaud for each other. And the cool thing about that is the students get plenty of takes, right? So they're not standing up in front of a group of people live who are judging them. They can send their best video in. So if you want to do the performing thing, that's a great way to do it. I recommend that you try to stay away from live performances, only because there's so many technological things that can be problems, right? Things like lag time, things like upload speeds, or the internet just went out in my area, things like that. Moving on, we have the responding category. It's pretty easy in a lot of the classroom management software that's out there, like Google Classroom, Blackboard School, any of the stuff that you're using, or even just as a user yourself, to go into Google Forms. You can set up an assignment where students listen to a work, a concert, some excerpts, one exemplar of someone playing their instrument, and then you ask them to submit, one paragraph about what they loved about it, one paragraph about what questions it brought up for them, things like that. If you are a Flipgrid user, this is pretty easy to set up so your students can just record a video where they're reflecting. So for those that don't like necessarily deciphering, middle school vernacular, and you'd rather just have them submit a video that says, hey, I love this thing about it, or I love that thing about it, Flipgrid's a really good way to do that if you're comfortable with that technology. A word of advice here, keep the questions short and understandable. So in rehearsal, a lot of us fall into this trap where we say, trombones, I want this to sound like Thor's hammer dropping from the heavens on a chicken coop or something like that. And then the trombones look at you and they go, so does that mean louder? Right? We have the same issue in our written work, right? Instead of tell me what you felt about this performance, you've got to be a little bit more specific. What was something you learned from this performance? What was a technique you noticed? Depending on the level of your students or the age of your students, that might be easier or harder, for what you want to get done. And then the last category in our national standards is connecting. So this might be a really great opportunity for you to talk to the history teacher or the art teacher or the English teacher and talk about some of the music that was influenced by historical events. You can assign listening and reflecting assignments based on that. There's really no limit to what you can do now, especially now that we're not all living in our, my class is 9:25 to 10:15 and your class is 10:17 to 11:05. Now that we can sort of get out of that silo a little bit, we have a little bit more flexibility. And I think that's a good thing that we should be taking advantage of. I have a couple of hints for you on being successful as a remote teacher right now. And again, this is stuff that I've picked up mostly from colleagues in the field. I'm certainly not the world's authority on this, but I've done this a lot. Unless you're directed by your school to have synchronous or everyone's at the same time type school meetings, don't do it. Given the uncertainty that our students are facing at home, a lot of them have intermittent internet access or they're sharing devices. It's really difficult to assume that all of our students can get online at the same time. I don't know in Missouri how many of you have been told by your schools that you need to be sort of online at your regular class time or not. Up here, we've been told not to, and it's for that reason. But I think you may have a little bit more coverage in Missouri for internet access. Try to use modalities that your students already know. So things like YouTube, Google Classroom, if your school uses that, SchoolTube, if your school uses that, those are all great. Now is probably not the time to, find some new esoteric program that's either difficult to use, a strange concept, or hard to set up, right? Because you're just setting yourself up now to be the tech support person for your 100 students or your 50 band kids. And that's going to take a lot of time that you may or may not have at this point. So try to use resources or modalities that your kids already know. My next hint is understand the resources that are available to you now. A lot of things have changed lately. And a little caveat, just because it's available doesn't mean you should use it, right? You still got to be pretty discerning about what you're asking your kids to do. But publishers right now have changed their copyright rules. They're making items available online. If you've purchased things through Pepper, I know over the past couple of years, they're going to let you email them, and they'll give you access codes to send to your students to access those materials digitally. Stuff that we never thought that these publishers would do, they're doing. And if there's something you need that you don't have a resource for, call the publisher. I've been pretty impressed with how the publishers have been responding to this new way of doing things. I've had interactions with Alfred, Hal Leonard, and Pepper Company at large. And anytime I've needed something for my students or for an area teacher who's asked me to help them out, they've been really responsive about making sure we get that. C. Allen's also a publisher that's been doing a lot of that. So there's a couple of resources you might want to know about. So Sight Reading Factory is now free, and it's got a fairly low learning curve. Most people have been able to figure that one out pretty easily. Pepper is allowing you to access things that you bought physically as a digital file. Music First is now 50% off, so that free window closed, but now they're doing 50% off if your school's still buying things. Musictheory.net, they'll allow you to create custom exercises for your students, so that's a really good resource to know. Smart Music is now free, so if any of you haven't used Smart Music yet because of the cost, now's a good time to give it a shot and see if you really like it. And then Flipgrid is a group video sharing platform where you can set up classes and topics, and kids can sort of send videos back and forth to you or to each other, depending on how you set it up. It's been pretty widely used right now in the music field. I have a couple of little closing thoughts. We're learning every day about new resources that are available to us, and we're learning every day about what works best with certain age groups and what doesn't work with certain age groups. So keep trolling the internet, because people have experience with this stuff, and they're not being shy about sharing their experiences. So if you see something that you think you might want to use, just Google it, see what people are saying about it. For those of you who have been mentoring newer teachers, and I know Missouri has a pretty strong reputation for this, now is a good time to let that newer teacher mentor you on some of the new technologies that could be useful, right? They've just been exposed to more, especially on the technology end. So let them step up a little bit. Ask them for help. I promise you they'll appreciate it. Cut yourself and your students some slack. Understand now that people will miss deadlines. Technology is not going to work consistently. Internet access might be sporadic. Devices may, reboot in the middle of a recording. So be gracious to your students. Allow them some space. And then the next hint I have for you is probably the most important one. And it's remind your students that you care about them. Do it every single time that you communicate. Check in incessantly with them. They might find it annoying, and they might start rolling their eyes at you behind your back or to your face when they get back in the fall. But you're going to have a student who's overwhelmed, depressed, scared, and hearing from you every day might be what gets them through this. You might be the only bit of positive news they get. So even though it can be a pain in the butt to email your kids and you may feel like you're annoying them by telling them how much you care about them, do it anyway. As music educators, we tend to see our kids for multiple years in a row. We may have the strongest relationship with them of any teacher that they'll ever have. And so, reach out, be in touch with your kids, let them know how much you care about them, and that if they need help, you're there for them. And then the last thing I've got for you is be in touch. Talk to Dr. Purcell in Missouri if you need help with anything technology. He's a wizard. If I can help you, shoot me an email, give me a call, find me on Facebook, or get my email address from Dr. Purcell. So today's sort of meant to be an overview, and the info I gave you certainly isn't exhaustive. But if you need more detail or if I can help you with any ideas for your classes, just let me know. I'm happy to help. I'm just sitting here in my house waiting to be called. So if I can help you, let me know. If any of you have any questions, now's the time. Oh, I love that idea about video greetings. I've seen some of that online. Our local elementary school just did a hi Andy, a great parade through the neighborhood. All the teachers got into their cars and kids got out and were waving to them to just have that connection. I think we underestimate that a lot of times. So, if you have the opportunity to connect with a student, connect with a student. It's important. And as music teachers, we know what it means. So, are there any questions I can help answer right now? Okay. Well, thanks again, Dr. Purcell, for letting me come and do a little bit of this. And if any of you need anything, my email address is Philip, Philip .Edelman, Edelman, at maine.edu. And I'm happy to help you as much or as little as you need. So please feel free to be in touch and take care of yourselves. Thanks.